Hi again, welcome back to the channel. My name is Elise. I'm a rabbi in training. This is part of a 5-part series that's all about learning how to read Torah, or not only learning how to read Torah, but learning how to chant Torah. Last week, I uploaded a video about how to read basic Hebrew, going over the consonants, the vowels, syllables, and where to put emphasis on Hebrew words. You can find the link to that video in the description below. This week, we're going to move beyond Hebrew pronunciation and we're going to go to the chanting. We're going to go over a few things in this video. The first being what to expect when you open a tikkun korim. A tikkun korim, by the way, is the book that you use to practice your Torah reading, or the printed page that you find on a website. Wherever you find it, they will all usually look the same, and I will walk you through what that is. Then we will go over what the marks actually look like, and I'll give 2 examples. The first will be the Shmot Te'amim paragraph, or the Ta'amei Mikra paragraph, and the second will be an example from real life that you can find in many different places, particularly a Siddur. And I'll let that be all I say for now. It'll be a surprise. Finally, we are going to go over a few of the trope marks, but we're going to go over the 3 most common formulas. So let's get started. So, what does it look like when you open a practice Torah chanting book, or a tikkun korim? Well, if you open this book, regardless of which publishing company you buy it from, or which website you print a page from, they're all going to look fairly similar. Each page is going to have 2 columns on it, and both of those columns will be in Hebrew. The column on the right is the vocalized column. That column contains all of the Hebrew in more readable font, with all of the vowel marks, the trope marks, the verse numbers, basically everything you need to know so that you can practice and slowly get to know the Hebrew. The paragraph on the left is what you're going to see in the Torah scroll. So what are you going to see in the Torah scroll? Well, you are going to see Hebrew. No question, you are going to see Hebrew. But you are not going to see Hebrew the way you're used to seeing Hebrew. The font is different. Not only that, but there are no vowel marks, there are no trope marks. All you see are the letters, the Hebrew letters, which represent the consonants. So those are the differences between the 2 columns. So, how do you practice? You go from the right column, you learn really well what's on the right column, and then you move on to the left column, and you learn to memorize what you've practiced on the right column, and you move it to the left column, and the left column should serve as a memory aid. As we go through this video, I will provide more tips and tricks for practice, but in the meantime, that is basically what you will see on a tikkun page. So, what does trope sound like? Trope is a way of transmitting the oral tradition, right? And Jews, as you all know, have been everywhere. We've moved around a lot, and we've lived all over the world in different regions. So what does this mean? This means that no one is going to have the exact same trope, because everyone comes from different places. A person who comes from Germany will have a different tradition than a person who comes from Poland, will have a different tradition to someone who's from Italy, will have a different tradition to someone who's from Morocco or Iran or Jerusalem. So what am I teaching you in this video? Well, the conservative movement and not just the conservative movement, but a lot of American Jews follow what we call the Eastern European nusach, or the Eastern European tradition. The trope that I will be teaching you is a trope that can be found in the book Biblical Chant by Abraham Binder. Abraham Binder was Eastern European, and this was the trope that he taught to his students who were at JTS, which is in New York. So because of this, it got transmitted everywhere, and so now this is the most popular trope. Now, I'm going to give a small disclaimer here. It might not sound exactly the same as what you're used to hearing at synagogue. That's because every single B'nai Mitzvah tutor will teach the trope the way they learned the trope. And most people do not learn the trope from a piece of paper. They learn by ear. They learn orally. And so because they learn orally through the history of transmission, it changes over time. But I'm going to teach you this particular version that is found in this particular book. So, what does it sound like? I'm going to give an example right now of the Shmot Te'ami. These are the names of the marks. These are basically every single mark that you will find in the Torah. Kadma munach zarka munach segol munach revi'i mapach pashta munach zakev katon zakev gadol mecha tipcha munach et nachta pazer tlisha ktana tlisha gdola kadma ve'azla geresh gershayim darga tevir yetiv psik sof pasuk shalshelet karne fara mercha kfula yerach ben yomo. So that was the trope. That's all well and good. But what does this sound like in actual practice? A lot of synagogues tend to do the V'ahavta paragraph, or the first paragraph after the Shema, out loud. And they do this in some approximation of the Torah trope. What does this sound like in particular with the Binder trope that I am trying to teach you? Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, Bechol levavcha, Uvechol nafshecha, Uvechol meodecha, Ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele, Asher Anochi mitzavcha hayom alevavecha v'shinatam levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shivtecha beveitecha u'lechtecha v'derech u'v'shochbecha u'v'kumecha u'kshaltam leot al yadecha v'ayu letotafot bein einecha uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha uvisharecha. Feel free to use this as a reference for when you want to practice what the marks sound like with different syllables. You can do this with all 3 paragraphs of the Shema, but I'm only going to be showing you the first paragraph. Okay, so we did 2 examples. Great. Now let's get to the meat. Let's actually learn some trope. How am I going to teach you guys the trope in this video? Not everyone reads sheet music, but I am going to include sheet music examples in this video for you to use as reference, just in case you are musically inclined. I will also show you the contour of the melody, aka, does it go high? Does it go low? Does it go side to side? Basically, where you want your voice to go. And I'll also give you a few tips and tricks for just, how to remember the different marks. Before I go over the first formula, I want to make a quick note about every single trope mark in the Torah trope. According to the Eastern European tradition, every single combination of trope marks is in a major key. What does that mean? What is a major key? A major key sounds happy. Think Mary Had a Little Lamb, Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, The Star-Spangled Banner. All of these songs are in major. And so you want to have that vibe, for lack of better wording, every time you do your trope. So we're going to go over 3 particular marks, starting with the et nachta formula. So the first formula we are going to look at is not the most common. So what is the mercha, tipcha, munach, et nachta? If we go back to the Shmot Te'amim, I'll briefly highlight / circle what that formula is. The mercha looks like a little curved line underneath the word. It curves down and to the left. So it looks like the bottom right quarter of a circle. What does a tipcha look like? A tipcha is basically a flipped version of a mercha. It also looks like a quarter of a circle, but instead of curving down and to the left, it curves down and to the right. Then you have a munach. What is a munach? It also is underneath the word, and it looks like a flipped L underneath the word. Finally, you have an et nachta. What does an et nachta look like? An et nachta looks like a wishing bone underneath the letter. So, what does it sound like? I will sing it now. Mercha tipcha munach et nachta. Okay, so what do you need to know about this formula? This is the halfway point. Almost every verse or every pasuk is going to have this formula, with the exception of really, really short verses. The et nachta is not a comma. I think it's probably closer to a semicolon in terms of actual punctuation. How can we remember that? Well, the mercha tipcha munach et nachta lingers in one place, but it ends upwards. Now think about it. When we talk, what do? If we're in the middle of a sentence, we go up. But if we're at the end of a sentence, we go down. This is what the et nachta is doing. So always remember, if you don't remember anything else about the et nachta, remember that the et nachta will always go up. So that's the et nachta. That was the complete formula. The mercha tipcha munach et nachta, that's all of it. But you're not always going to see that. So what do if you don't see it? You just don't do the melody of the marks that are not there. So what are the possible combos that you are going to see? There will always be a tipcha, and there will always be an et nachta. So at the very least, you will always have to say tipcha et nachta. Anyways, that is the mercha tipcha munach et nachta. How should you practice? Open a chumash. It doesn't need to be a special tikkun. It doesn't need to be a practice book. Open any chumash. Go to a random page in the Torah and look for the mercha tipcha munach et nachta and just say, okay, I've got this phrase here that has an et nachta in it. Let's just read it. I usually follow the rule of 3s. So read it 3 times. And if you read it at least 3 times, it should start to solidify in your head. Anyways, that is the mercha tipcha munach et nachta formula. Let's move on. We're going to do the mercha tipcha mercha sof pasuk formula. This formula appears in every verse without fail. Why? Because this is the end formula, where the et nachta marks the halfway point, the sof pasuk marks the end of the verse. So, what do the marks look like? Well, just like mercha tipcha munach et nachta, the mercha and tipcha in this formula are the same. The mercha is like a quarter of a circle with the line curving down and to the left. The tipcha is also the same as in the et nachta formula. It's another quarter of a circle flipped. Instead of curving towards the left, it is curving downwards and to the right. Now, here is where things change. Now you have another mercha. As I just explained, the mercha is a quarter of a circle curving downward and to the left. That's the mercha. It occurs twice. And finally, you have the sof pasuk. Some people will tell you that a sof pasuk is just a vertical line that appears under a letter. I personally disagree. What you will see is that in every verse of the Torah, after the end of the verse or after the end of the pasuk, you will see a colon. The sof pasuk is the colon, not the vertical line. The vertical line is a meteg, and that means you put the emphasis of the melody there. Why? Because the colon is nowhere in the word. So how else do you know where you're going to say it? That's all there is to it. So, what does it sound like? It sounds like this. Mercha, tipcha, mercha, sof pasuk. So what is the difference between a sof pasuk formula and an etnachta formula? Like I said before, when you are in the middle of a sentence, you go up. But when you're at the end of a sentence, you go down. So the beginning of each formula is exactly the same. However, in the etnachta, because you're at the halfway point, you're going up. And in the sof pasuk formula, you're going down. And that's really all there is to it. Now, you're not always going to get a verse where all 4 marks appear from that formula. What do you do if that happens? You remove the marks and you don't sing the melody of the marks that are not there. You will always have 2, the tipcha and the sof pasuk. It'll sound like this. Tipcha, sof pasuk. You will always get at least that. So how should you practice? Well, like I said before, you either read the sheet music or you repeat after me as many times as you need. You familiarize yourself with all of the possible combos, and then you go into the Chumash and you look for examples on the ground. Before we move on to the final formula that I'm going to cover in this video, I'm going to give a small side note. An end of a verse is an end of the verse. It happens all the time. It's fairly standard, with one exception. What is that exception? The Torah reading is split into 7 sections when you go to synagogue on Shabbat. These sections are called aliyot. When you reach the end of your section, you do a different tune. The marks are the same as the other mercha tipcha, mercha sof pasuk formula, but the difference between this one and the other one is that unlike every other combination in the Torah, this particular formula for the end of a section goes into minor. It gets a little sad, and it really makes a huge difference in how we hear when we are in shul. It's clear to everyone that you are about to end the section. That is why it's important to know this formula. So, how does it go? It goes like this. Mercha tipcha, mercha sof pasuk. That is how it goes. You can tell it sounds very different. Practice that the same way that you would practice any other end of verse formula. Just keep in mind that that difference exists and it's something that you should be aware of. Now, we're going to cover the third most common formula. This is the munach katon formula. What are the marks in it? You will always have the following marks. You're going to have a kadma, mapach pashta, munach katon. So what do all of those look like? A kadma is also a quarter of a circle, but it appears above the word. And it starts up from below, and it goes up and curves to the left. That is a kadma. A mapach is like the less than symbol in math underneath the word. Now, the pashta and the kadma are the exact same symbol. How do you tell the difference? A kadma will always appear before the end of the word. It's not going to be offset or anything like that. It's just going to appear above the syllable necessary. And it always comes before a mapach in this case. A pashta, on the other hand, is always going to be on the very last letter of the word. And the pashta does not come before a mapach. It goes before the next part of the formula, which is a munach katon. The munach, just like in the etnachta formula, is a flipped L underneath the word. And finally, you have the katon, or the zakef katon if you want the long form of the word. What does it look like? It looks like a colon above the word. This is what it sounds like. Kadma mapach pashta munach katon. How do you remember this entire formula? It goes higher in range than the etnachta and the sof pasuk. The mercha tipcha formulas all start mercha tipcha. That's pretty low. But the kadma is kadma mapach pashta. That's much higher. So keep in mind that as you go through the Torah trope, there's a flow to it. When you speak, usually for any of your sentences, even if you're kind of ending up at the halfway point or asking a question or going low at the end or finishing a sentence, your sentences usually follow parabolic structure. So you're going to start relatively low. You're usually going to go higher in the middle of your sentence. Don't ask me why, you just do. And then when you get to the end, you're going to go low because that's a mark of the end. The katon formula is like a midpoint. It happens before the etnachta or between the etnachta and the sof pasuk. So how do you practice? Like the other formulas that we went over, you move to a chumash and you go and you open it to a random page in the Torah and you pick a verse, any verse, and you apply it to real words. And you repeat it over and over and over again. And as you do this, you will get a sense of how these things are supposed to go. And that's really all there is to it. So that's it. I've gone through the 3 most common trope marks that you will find when you are reading Torah. Where do we go from here? I'm going to provide all of the sheet music in a link at the bottom of this video. These are taken directly from the Binder. Practice them, learn them, internalize them, sing them in the car or on the bus. Do whatever you need to do to make these feel like second nature. And by doing that, you will really, really get to know the chanting. Next week, we'll continue going over even more trope. Behatzlacha, good luck. Enjoy your practice. Like and subscribe if you want to continue on with this series. And have a great weekend.